This is a colander. This is the New England Patriots offensive line. What's the difference, you may ask? The colander has fewer holes.
Welcome to Patriots Touchback Podcast.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to a brand new edition here of the Patriots Touchback Podcast. We are in episode 9 of season 2. I am your host, Karl. I am joined by Nick, JD, and Kieron. They're all back from their breaks. Gentlemen, how are we doing?
All good.
Not bad, thank you.
Hot.
I think everyone is complaining about the heat regarding on this. I mean, it's still sitting about 26 degrees in my streaming right now, so I'm still sweating. But I digress. Johnny, I hope you're feeling better. You've now come off IR. Hope you're feeling better.
I am feel human again, so that's good.
Awesome. And Nick, you've just come back off a lovely holiday. Hope you're all refreshed and ready to go.
I'm not going to complain about the weather other than it's a little cold because I've just come back from like mid-30s, so mid-20s is feeling a little chilly, so I'm not going to moan.
Nope, shouldn't moan either. Before we get cracking on with the show, guys, remember to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, tell all your friends, follow us on all our social media platforms, and make sure you follow us on our podcast on Spotify as well. And then big up to everyone that actually viewed our little short video that we did in the week regarding Judas Smith-Schuster's departure. Much appreciated. Go check it out. The link will be down in the description below, and somewhere later on today you'll find in the top right hand corner of your screen a little bar pop up to go and click on that link as well. So, gentlemen, we want to talk about the preseason game that happened last Thursday night, or in the early hours of Friday morning from the UK. And of course, it ended the New England Patriots 17, the Carolina Panthers 3. First things first, a defensive masterclass again from the Patriots D-line. A lot of good moments in there. Jeremiah Farms Jr. from defensive tackle had an absolute stellar game, playing in Christian Barmore's position, which was absolutely pivotal. Nick, what was your takeaways from the defensive side of the ball first? We will get into the offense because obviously there is a few things that we do need to speak about. But let's start with the defensive side of the ball because you can't not speak about the defense first because they gave up only 3 points throughout the entirety of the game, and which is something we're quite accustomed to in New England with our defense, especially over the last 2 to 3 years anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I would carry out that with saying that it was just Carolina. It wasn't exactly a top quality team, but I think we all knew that the defense was gonna. The defense has always been our strength the past few years. In the dire of what was last season. We stood there and we chirped at how well the defense was doing and kept us to within one score in four games, and it was the defense doing what the New England defense does. So the fact that the defense hasn't really changed, and yes, we've lost Barmore for what could probably be most likely to be the entire year. I wasn't worried about the defense this year. Never have been. I was just expecting it to continue. When you're taking the DC effectively and making him the head coach, the defense isn't really going to change that much. So I was never worried about the defense. They did what they needed to do. Like I said, Carolina are a poor team anyway, but you can only beat who's in front of you. Farms had a great game, and he's going to need to keep playing like that to cover for Barmore. I think Keon White, although he didn't have loads of game time, he is one of the number ones, if you like. Again, he's going to have to continue to step up and play well to make sure that he does his bit. So, no, I felt the defense was performed well, but it's what I expected.
Yeah, no, I agree. There was a lot. There was a couple of more standout players. Giles Harris, Elise, and I'm gonna botcher this guy's name, Eximans, who did really, really well in that game as well. JD, we'll go through to you. What was your takeaways from the defensive side? I mean, more importantly, because we're going to speak a little bit about Christian Gonzalez later on. But is there anybody in the secondary that you believe that could potentially challenge the starting secondary? Because we know what the starting secondary will be. It'll be Christian Gonzalez. It'll be Jonathan Jones. It'll be Marcus Jones playing in the slot. It will be
and then Duggar and Peppers at safety.
Duggar and Jabril Peppers at the safety positions. Is there anyone from the second string or third string secondary that could potentially break through?
Well, I thought Marcellus Dial, got a decent amount of reps. I thought that was something that was nice to see, a young rookie getting a decent amount of reps. He was solid, tackled well, which is nice to see. I think as well, overall defensively, I think I hesitate to take too much from a preseason game, especially a preseason game from what is ultimately two crap teams. In a driving monsoon, like there's not going to be very little taken from that. I think defensively, for me, we did what we were supposed to do. I'm not going to lose my mind. I think defensively over this, I think the Panthers had something like 89 passing yards or something like that, and averaged like 3 yards per play, which is fantastic. And obviously, if the Patriots can do that every week, we'll be just fine. But when you're playing against a bad team, and in the weather conditions we're playing in, you want to see them perform like that, and they did. So I'm not going to give them too many flowers for what they did, but I think they did what they were supposed to do, and kept a bad offense without its starters to, just a very late field goal, and that's nice to see. But I think secondary wise, Sean Wade had a nice pass breakup. He dropped an interception, which is never nice, but I guess as a defensive player that counts as a pass breakup. So that's a positive stat. But yeah, I think interesting to see the rotation we've got in the secondary, because I know that with Devin McCourty was on the call on the broadcast, and he was kind of waxing lyrical about Jalen Hawkins quite a lot, and seemed very keen on his instincts and kind of the way he played. And I think he was the player that came down and hit the hole and had a great hit on one of the Carolina wide receivers, and really kind of the receiver kind of got stood up and fell kind of backwards, and Hawkins flew in and kind of took his head off a little bit. And it was a pretty kind of nice to see that kind of fire in the defense. Somebody that can hit like that, I think was a nice addition.
No, I agree. Kieron, what about you?
I think you need a little bit of perspective. I mean, yes, they did their job, but it was kind of a mixed lineup for us. We had some starters in there to start with, alongside some depth players. And I mean, just looking at the players that Carolina had out there, I mean, it's just terrible. These are third and fourth strings. I mean, Jack Plummer and Jake Luton at quarterback. Starting running back was Mike Boone. Leading receiver, Jordan Matthews. Anyone remember him? The ghost of Jordan Matthews. I mean, this was not the Carolina Panthers, it's the Carolina Rescue Cats, in my opinion. This was a really bad team and a really bad game. But just going back to the secondary, I think it's an opportunity now for Marco Wilson, because as a slot corner, he could have a chance to potentially start if Marcus Jones isn't practicing as much. Marcus Jones has his injury problems. You spoke about Farms. He had a really good game. And then there's the UDFA safety, Pettis, that I've been getting a lot of hype about. He seems to be a bit like what you said with regards to Hawkins, in terms of someone who's going to come downhill and absolutely lay someone out. And I think he had a similar moment to Hawkins in the game where he kind of came on a blitz and absolutely annihilated someone on the goal line. Yeah. So it was what it was at the end of the day. Like, it was one of the worst games you could possibly watch, especially for people like us in the UK, where it's late at night. You're excited to have Patriots football back, and you almost falling asleep at how bad it was. But the only real shining light and entertainment was when Joe Milton came in, because we got absolutely nothing from either the two QBs you expect to compete to start anyway. The Drake May thing was a huge anticlimax, and then way too much of Bailey Zappi. Like, what was that all about?
That didn't make much sense to me at all in regarding to, Brissett played one series, okay, fine. Then Drake May turned and goes, right, okay, we're probably going to watch him play for the rest of the half, possibly. He only plays one series. He played 7 snaps, 2 for 3 for 19 yards. And I'm thinking, what are we actually trying to achieve here? If this is going to be the callback that's going to be starting for us, if potentially not this season, but for next season, you need to give him as much game time and game reps as possible. However, though, I have saw in the news in the week was that the offensive line, or the second string offensive line, was about as useful as wet toilet paper, apparently.
I think it's difficult. Sorry, go on, Nick.
No, I was just going to say, Gerard Mayo said that in an interview after the game. He said that he didn't want to put Drake May out there behind anyone but the number ones. So as the number ones were only playing 2 series and Brissett played the first one, May was only ever going to play that one series. As soon as he took the number ones out, he was always taking out. Now, I don't know whether that's to protect Drake May himself or to protect the allure that, he is what we think he is. You don't want to put him in the number 2s and then him get all flustered and broken and, Matt Jones 2.0. Nobody needs to see that. So I can kind of understand both sides, but I think, was there a need to play Brissett? Brissett could have played a series this week, or 2, and he could have maybe said, right, okay, well, give Drake May 2 series or 3 series and then pull him and the number ones out. And so, Mayo's ultimately the head coach. He said that's why he did it. So I guess you have to go with it. I do agree with the Bailey Zappi thing. I really don't get. I understand he's there as a camp body. He's there to share the reps and let Brissett and May and that rest. But he's not going to make the 53, right? He's going to get cut and then maybe pulled back to the practice. I think he'll probably get pulled back to the practice squad. Well, if that's the case, then, he doesn't need to be doing that now. He doesn't need to be playing all that time. I mean, Milton was one of these where you could see the Carolina game was a perfect example of his tape from when he was drafted. It was all like big passes, but his footwork was all over everywhere. His accuracy was all over everywhere. If he's gonna survive, he needs to get more accurate with the ball. So, I moving back to what Kieron said about just before we move on too far. Jonathan Jones and Marcus Jones are both not training properly and what have you. So those second string corners really do have, the chance to get, take it in their teeth, and make a name for themselves, because it doesn't look like either Joneses are going to be, fighting fit and up to speed as we get going. So there's chances there. You've got to take your chance, grab it with both hands and run with it. But there's a lot of issues, and you've just got to take it with a pinch of salt and say it's pre-season. We are a work in progress.
I think
We
that's a
are,
good point.
yeah.
I think that the Bailey Zappi thing, I think to me, the only way I can kind of make sense of it is we know that May and Brissett are going to be part of the roster. We know that. I think the most likely scenario is those two make the 53, and either Zappi or Milton are going to be on the practice squad. And I think, to be honest with you, at this point, with the weather conditions, with the fact the offensive line weren't going to play a great deal, I think it was a case of let those two play, give them live reps, which, I mean, Bailey Zappi's had plenty of in the past 2 seasons. He's started 8 games. But I think it was a chance to give those two an opportunity to see what they can do, fight for that 3rd and 4th roster spot. Because realistically, over the next couple of weeks before the season starts, we're going to be the reps, and you saw it today in the reports from training camp, the reps for those two are going to be far and few between, because now it's about getting the first team and the backups prepared for the season. And the 3rd and 4th string QB are not going to get many reps. So I think it was probably a last hurrah for them, as in giving them an opportunity to go, show us what you can do, show other teams what you can do as well. And then I think the likelihood is Milton makes the emergency QB in the practice squad, Zappi's gone, and May and Brissett are on the roster fighting for the number 1 spot. And I think Brissett likely wins it.
I think we carry 3. I think we carry 3. I think you're going to see 3 QBs on the 53, and then you will have that emergency QB, that 4th QB on the practice squad. That's why I wouldn't let Milton go, because somebody will pick him up.
And I think obviously because of the new concussion protocol, the new concussion protocols, you are allowed now to have a 3rd quarterback on your roster out on game day as well. So it just makes more sense to keep hold of Joe Milton and cut Zappi. I mean, do I really want Zappi back here? Probably not. I honestly don't. He's nothing special. He's nothing that we haven't seen before. He's not someone that you can only compete with the roster that you have if you are going to start. Bailey Zappi is not one of those quarterbacks that's ready to start. He's going to be one of those quarterbacks. He's going to be like a Taylor Heineke, where he's going to go from roster to roster to roster to roster in his career. He's one of those quarterbacks. He's going to be a journeyman.
I think there's too many holes in the roster that if we're down to Milton or Zappi, who cares at that point? We're not winning games. So it doesn't really matter. And I think if you stick Milton on the practice squad, he was drafted in the 6th, 7th round. I mean, teams had 6 opportunities to draft him if they really wanted him, and nobody did. And I don't think the Carolina tape from Thursday is convincing anybody, we need this guy now for a roster spot. So I think if you stick him on the practice squad, he may get taken, but I doubt it. Teams had their opportunity to take him, plenty of them, and they chose not to. So I think sticking him on the practice squad probably keeps him safe. For me, Zappi, there's 15 other Bailey Zappis somewhere we can find. If we're at that desperate level, then we can just take somebody off the street who's not Bailey Zappi, and we'll be fine.
It could be worse. The Raiders just re-signed Nathan Peterman, so it could be worse. Go on,
Kieron.
Kieron.
Thing I would say is that Johnny made a good point in terms about potentially are they trying to put Zappi in the shop window? But I think what I would have done is maybe flip Milton and Zappi around. Like, there was no need for Bailey Zappi to play 2.5 quarters. He has enough regular season tape over the last couple of years to show what he's about. Whereas Joe Milton's a 6th round rookie. And a lot of the talk has been about how Milton had usurped Zappi in the order and was likely to be the QB3. So it kind of contradicts that a little bit. Surely then you'd have Milton play 2.5 quarters and Zappi would get a few snaps at the end of the game. Like, it seems a little bit strange to me that you wouldn't want to see more of the guy you've just drafted.
I think the potential reason is they might be doing him a solid and just throwing him a bone and saying, go put something on film. A little bit more on film. Hopefully you have something decent like the throw to Booty, and just say, hopefully, you've been a good foot soldier the past few years. You're in a pretty tough situation with Mac Jones. Throw you a bone and give you an opportunity to kind of put something on film, because you're probably gone in the next week or so, and hopefully it helps you get a roster spot somewhere else. I think that's the most likely scenario why he got as many reps. Because you're right, Kieron, it doesn't make any sense for him to get as many reps as he did. There's somebody who we know is pretty much guaranteed to not be on the roster.
No, I agree, completely agree. Let's move over to the offensive side, because obviously we need to talk about the quarterbacks. Obviously, Brissett, he started the game, only played 1 series. It. I don't know what to make of it because on his day we know Brissett can be a good quarterback. What he did when he played for the Browns, there is something that he can be utilised with. The problem is though, this offensive line is giving me jitters already. And we're not even in week 1 of normal game time yet, and already the offense is. I'm shitting myself right now because it's not great. It really, really isn't. Nick, talk to me, man, because you waxed lyrical pre-draft saying that we should be taking a tackle instead of taking the quarterback or getting the picks from either the Giants or the Vikings or both for that matter, and accumulating draft picks and getting a tackle, maybe getting another receiver in the board. I actually looked on it a little more in depth and how it all panned out. If we'd have stuck as we are, we could have got the left tackle out of Notre Dame. I've forgotten. Joel at Notre Dame, and then with a further pick down the board, you could have took Malik Neighbors, and then in the second, and then the second round, you could have got Sumantaya, you could have got Patrick Paul. It's. I'm not going to say it's all in hindsight right now because we can't really look on this until the following year. All I'll say is this: if we did take them picks off the Giants, and they end up with a top 5 pick, we could look like absolute morons next year. Well, we're still going to end up with a top 5 pick, but you can imagine, say, for example, we end up with, let's just say for prime sake, we end up with the 3rd overall pick, and the Giants, they had a worse, they won't have a worse division, but we're just being hypothetical here. If they had the 2nd overall pick, could you imagine what we could have done with those 2 picks if we actually traded down to get those picks, and the Giants sucked so badly they could actually end up giving us the 2nd overall pick? We could have got 2 prime tackles straight off the bat, bang, bang. And then you could start.
I realise we're at the beginning of the season, we're at the beginning of the college season, but for me, one of the best guys in next year's draft, and I realise it's a long way, so I am spitballing here, but one of the best guys in the draft next year, I think, will be Will Campbell, who's a left tackle. He may well go number 1. Now, you're telling me, again, I hate to say I told you so. I would have let May go. I would have traded with the Giants. You saw on Hard Knocks, they weren't offering enough for the Patriots. The Patriots wanted an absolute bagful, but
they wanted a king's ransom.
Yeah, they wanted a king. I think they could have quite easily said to, the Giants, give us your number 1 this year, which has just gone. Give us your number 1 next year, and give us your number 3 next year, and that's effectively, close to what San Francisco gave up for Lance anyway. So you could have done that, and then you could have traded again with Minnesota, who would have come up to maybe try and steal Penix Jr., or they would have just gone with McCarr. But you could have quite easily, like you said, I don't think you'd have got Joe Alt because the Chargers would have, Harbaugh would have taken him anyway at 4. But I was raving about JC Latham. He would have been my guy to get. If I had to move about a bit to get him, I would have done. I'd have got JC Latham. You could, like you said, Cinnamon Tara was there. You had some tackles later on in some good tackles into
Patrick Paul, Tyler Guyton.
Yeah. Tyler Guyton went to the Cowboys right at the end of the round. You could have quite easily dipped back in and got him anyway. We got Caden Wallace, and I'm not here saying Caden Wallace isn't good enough because he's looking like a rookie. He looks like he's got a lot to learn, but it's all well and good saying this now, but that's not what we've got. So there's no point in dwelling on it. Looking at the O-line as it is, I think our best bet is Okafor at left tackle. I think we need to put Caden Wallace at right tackle. I kick on Wenyu inside to right guard. That seems to be where he's been playing a lot, and then you've got a left guard issue, which Cole Strange isn't fit. I don't expect him to get a new contract, so he's not going to be around much longer. City, so yeah. You've got, at least you're not searching for a left tackle and you're only searching for a left guard, but nevertheless, there are holes. You said about the colander at the beginning, there are big holes in this offensive line, and we need to sort them out and plug them quickly.
We desperately do, because it's not good, as you said. As the currently stands with the starting O-line, as it already says, it's at right tackle you've got Chuks Okafor, at right guard you've got Mike Onwenu, at centre you've got David Andrews, at left guard you've got Sidi So, and then obviously at left tackle you've got Vidarian Lowe. I know it's a picture of a colander, ladies and gentlemen, but what's the difference?
It baffles me that there are some beat reporters that have actually said, "Oh, he's been okay here and there." I'm sorry, but I've just listened to
Tom Cullen's latest show, and he said Vidarian Lowe was absolute ass.
Yeah, and that is right. I mean, I've seen a couple that have said like he's been okay and looks like the top option. I just really, really struggle to see that. He is a complete and utter liability at that position, and it just absolutely just completely blows my mind that they are in this situation where we are 3 weeks out from the season and we have potentially Lowe at left tackle when there is Donovan Smith, David Bakhtiari, DJ Humphries, and Charles Leno all still in free agency, all of which have a huge amount of experience in the league. Are they elite now? No. But would they be an upgrade on Lowe? Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. They would make the line a little bit serviceable. It would still be probably an average to below average offensive line, but it would be an upgrade for me. And I think they've got to address that ASAP.
And I think the problem is that as well is the fact that with Brissett under center, he's not a mobile quarterback. The reason why he was able to do so well for the Cleveland Browns was because he was behind one of the top 5 offensive lines in the NFL. That's why he was able to have so much time in the pocket and get that ball out very, 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 very quickly and get it further down the field. He ain't going to have the time. He ain't going to have the time or the patience with this offensive line.
For a second, I would absolutely give them a phone call and say, what do you want for Jack Conklin? Because then you could stick him at right tackle and move Okorafor to left tackle, because Conklin now is in a position battle on the right-hand side with DeJuan Jones, who was a rookie last year, absolute steal in the 4th round, looked like an absolute monster. So is Conklin even going to be the starter there? He's 31, 32, plenty of experience. Coming off an injury, yes, but he would be a real good addition, I think. You could probably get him for a late-round pick, and that at least, once again, solidifies your offensive line. So I think there are options out there that have to be discussed, because we cannot go into week 1 with Vidarian Lowe playing left tackle. It is just an absolute. That is it. That is.
And it's not like we don't have the cap space for it either.
No, yeah. And I think you are probably going to see us waiting around, I would imagine, for roster cuts and seeing the tackles that don't make the top end offensive lines, and just not quite good enough. And I think we could probably jump in and steal them. I think it might be a little bit early for an "I told you so" on Drake May not being the pick, though. I think maybe we might wait until more than 3 dropbacks to declare him not the right pick.
I was saying I told you so in that I was raving about the fact that we needed to prioritize our line. I realized that Drake May, you can't judge the man right now, but I haven't seen a massive improvement in his footwork either, and that was one of my big issues with him. But I don't see, you're just saying there, Johnny, I don't see how waiting around for tackles to get cut, who obviously haven't made it the grade at another team, is the best way forward for improving our team. That doesn't get. That's literally like, right, okay, I've got this piece of rubbish. That piece of rubbish has become available. Oh, I'll just swap that out for that. I mean.
But I think if you're one of the worst offensive lines in the league, you are likely going to have players who are worse than players who don't make some of the best offensive lines in the league. So the argument, like Kieron was saying there, if Jack Conklin isn't going to make the Browns, or he's not going to start, then the Cleveland Browns line is that good that we could take somebody who's not going to be a starter for them, and he's better than what we've got. And I think between Wallace, Okafor, and probably there is a lot of stuff about Elliott Wolf spending a lot of time with the offensive line during training camp and watching them quite closely, that I do imagine, because actually the interior played pretty well in the Carolina game and graded out in the 80s in pass blocking in PFF. It's just that the tackles, Okafor and Lowe, were in the 40s and 50s. So if we can start to look at just I don't even mean we have to get like a stud at either tackle, just someone who's serviceable. And I think we're in a much better position, especially with the system that Van Pelt wants to run, where we're going to be doing a lot of play action. We'll protect our tackles quite a lot. And Ramondre Stevenson, for what it's worth, has looked really good in camp by all reports. So the idea that if we can run the ball successfully and then have a solid play action game, I think that will also help negate. And I don't think in preseason and things we're going to see a lot of that, because we're going to hide a lot of that away. We're going to be pretty vanilla. I think once that comes out in the season, I think there's probably going to be a little bit more schematically that's going to help our offensive line look better, and some window dressing that's going to kind of help us, polish a turd a little bit, I think. But it is a concern.
One of the things, you made a very good point there, because what I also noticed for our preseason, not just for the paper, but for everyone, nearly every play most of these teams were running, bland, vanilla, basic plays. They're not going to give anything away in preseason, because you immediately, if someone says, someone's trying to do a free flick or writing a scheme where it's a wheel route to the second receiver and they'll go, hang on, you're not doing that in preseason, but okay, we can actually record that, because that might be something they're utilizing in the season. What happens in the first part, that happens in the first game of the season, it gets picked, it gets studied, and it gets picked. So I see that a lot, but yeah,
preseason is install the basics now. So you're going to see teams running the ball a lot. You're going to see teams running very basic route concepts. The kind of, because they're still installing basics. They've only been really in training camp for a handful of weeks. So I think you're not going to see close to what you'll see with the final product as we get several weeks into the season. So I think it'll be a learning curve, especially with it's new quarterback, new head coach, new offensive scheme.
It's new. It's just completely all new.
Yeah, it
is completely all new, and that's the biggest question mark out of all this. We don't know how it's going to end. We don't know how it's going to be. We could be thinking it could be worse than last season. I mean, let's be real. It can't be any worse than last season. It really can't.
Well, you'd hope not. But yeah, it was seriously concerned me, because we talk about the vulnerabilities on the offensive line, and if the one major problem on our line is our blind side, then you're going to see all the best rushers line up on that side, and then you're going to get Jacoby Brissett and Drake May alive, because Vizarian Lowe can't stop anything. I don't know. I genuinely don't know what the solution is in-house at this stage. Do you put a core of 4 back at left tackle, play Caden Wallace like Nick said? Do you potentially put Onwenu at right tackle, bring Layden Robinson inside, who's played pretty well at times, and then keep a core of 4 left tackle?
I thought that's what would have been the plan. I thought it would have been Okafor at left tackle. It would have been Layden Robinson at left guard. It'll be David Andrews at center. Right guard, you'll have Sidney Serve, and at right tackle, Michael Onwenu. When Onwenu kicked from guard to tackle last season, he was a brick wall. Nothing got through him. So why are we kicking him back into right guard again?
I would rather have, an up-and-coming guard and have a stable tackle on one side of the field than just because we want to put Onwenu arguably his best position, and then makes both tackle positions vulnerable.
Absolutely.
I don't know.
And
I think that they got to think very hard about this.
I think an average or above average tackle, which is what Onwenu is at right tackle, is a lot better than an elite guard. And I think for what it's worth, Layden Robinson was PFF's man of the match in the preseason game, and his run blocking grade was really high. So I think that's something we can think about as well. That actually getting Layden Robinson in there, and like I said earlier, the interior of our offensive line looked good. But I think, like you say, if we can kick out Onwenu to right tackle, and then have Okafor and Wallace battle out for left tackle, and then see what else makes its way to us in free agency or trade opportunities when teams start whittling down their rosters a little bit.
No, I agree. Let's go get out the doom and gloom section, shall we? Let's have a little bit more. Let's try and talk a little bit more fun stuff. So, Joe Milton, I know it was against Vernon Four Stringers, but you got to admit what he was doing was actually quite fun to watch. He's 6'5", 236. His athleticism is very, very good. Threw an absolute dart to Jaquan Jackson for the touchdown in the fourth quarter, I believe it was. What have you seen about Joe Milton? Yes, okay, he's still very skittish in the pocket. His footwork is not that great, but when he has that cannon of an arm on him and you give him time, he can fling the ball down the field. And we've been looking for a vertical threat for God knows how long.
You've just said it then. You've answered your own question. When he's got time, we've just talked about how the fact that our QBs are not going to have time behind this O-line. That was half of Mac Jones's problem last year. He didn't have the time that he needed because he was slow at getting his reads off because he was this, perfection that wanted it, was slow at his first read, second read, third read. He didn't have the time last year. Again, we just said it in this pod, you're not going to have Brissett and May aren't going to have the time behind this O-line. So Milton isn't going to have the time that he needs. We said it earlier. Accuracy. It's all well and good being able to throw an orange the length of a football field, but if it lands 100 yards right of where it should have done, that's not good either. I'd rather you throw it 50 yards and it be on target than throw it 100 yards and it be off target. Yeah. So, he needs to work. He needs to work on his on the downside of his game, which is being able to hit the target.
Yeah, and I wouldn't put too much stock into the touchdown pass. I mean, it was a nice throw, but the guy was wide open.
It was a blown coverage.
Yeah,
it was blown coverage. Yeah.
The most impressive thing was the elusiveness, and we talk about needing time in the pocket, but there was that one scramble where he evaded everyone for about 15 seconds and then managed to get a play off. And I mean that was good to watch. Someone that can extend the play a little bit. But that for me was the highlight. Really, I mean, he threw the ball 6 times. You can't really put too much stock into it. I think had he played the 2.5 quarters that Bailey Zappi had played, then maybe would have a bit more of an evaluation on him. But he can't really do much with what he had, to be honest.
No, and he was doing it against third and fourth stringers, which it is exciting to watch, and especially in a game that was as boring as that one was. A bit of excitement injected into it was nice, but I don't. The people calling for Joe Milton to be starting QB, I think maybe is a bit excessive at this point.
One thing I will say is he was more exciting than the 2 absolute duds that the Panthers had at QB in the game, in Luton and Plummer, who just looked completely out of their depth.
I felt sorry for Plummer when they put him back in. Just he looked so wet and miserable, and you were just like, just let that guy, let him just sit down. He's got 13 passing yards. Just let him just sit down for a bit.
I had promised for Jake Luton when he got drafted from the Oregon Beavers. I promised for him. He was a 7th round pick, I believe, but he showed promise, and unfortunately, that's now gone to the wayside. But anyway,
are you a fan of the Beaver? Then?
No, not. No, I presume you are, but no. Pause. Okay, receivers. So, there's one receiver that's trying to separate himself from the pack and trying to enter the roster. Of all the receivers that played in preseason against the Panthers, Butte had a good game. He had that good pass from Bailey Zappi, and I think he had about 45 yards receiving, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Someone else can double.
He had 3 catches for 53.
53.
We're a million miles away then. I thought, we kind of know who the receivers will be. It'll be, it's going to be Pop. It's going to be Baker. It's going to be Jalen Polk. It's going to be KJ Osborne, and it probably will be Kendrick Ball when he does eventually return. I think they are going to keep a spot open for him, even though he's on the pup list currently. So I think it's going to be a battle between Tyquan Thornton and Kayshon Boutte, who takes that next receiver position. But Boutte looked the player from LSU that we knew him to be, and it was good. It was good. It was good stuff to see.
I think it was similar to what we've probably seen of Boutte in the past and stuff and his later years at LSU, where there's some good stuff that flashes, but he's just inconsistent. He had a pretty rough drop, and yes, it was obviously not ideal weather, but that's apparently been a pretty common theme in training camp, in that he makes some plays, but he makes some boneheaded plays as well, where he's dropping balls he shouldn't be dropping and blowing assignments when he shouldn't be. So I think if he can kind of get his head screwed on, I think he's certainly got an opportunity to make the squad and potentially make an impact. I mean, him or Tyquan Thornton is kind of 6 1/2 dozen the other for me. I don't really mind.
I think with Booty, I think that the one thing you would say about him, one of his strong points is supposed to be his hands, and you saw that in the Carolina game. So the inconsistencies in camp is a little bit strange, considering that would be one of his strong points. I mean, I did see one writer say the other day that if he isn't going to make the roster, then that's because he's too similar to the likes of Jalen Polk. They play similar ways, but I don't know if I'm keeping Rager or Thornton over him. Like, Tyquan's gone into year 3 and still not seen anything from him. He's still one-dimensional, and he had a nice step on the defensive back on the deep ball from Jacoby Brissett, but although the ball was a tad overthrown, you'd like to see him try and make an adjustment to go up and get that. Rager, I think once again, like I've said this a couple of times in this podcast, I think you only keep him as a returner and like a depth option. I don't think he offers much in terms of your passing game. So if you evaluate those 3, Booty has the most talent. He's the youngest. Just keep him around, because I feel like he's one that would get swiped off a practice squad 100%.
Absolutely.
We said the other week, if his legal issues had still been hanging over him, I don't think he'd have been the choice. He'd probably wouldn't have made it. But the fact that, for as far as I can see, that's been dealt with, I think he's probably your man to move forward. Thornton, again, he's done enough to be on my radar, but he's not shining brightly. He's just there. Do you know what I mean? I get it. He's there on the list. He's there on the list, but he's not doing anything to make me want to move him up. The guys that have come in have all come in ahead of him, and it's like, right, show me why these guys should be behind you. And he's not doing that. He's just saying, he's showing me enough to say, consider me one of the 6. Right, I'm doing that. So where do you want me to go? Show me more. He's not showing me that more that I want to see.
I think he's draft pedigree and elite traits, isn't he? Like he's got elite speed. He's got something you can point to and say, this guy does something insanely well. The other 2 don't really have that. And I think that's potentially where he might get by and be given the opportunity, because AVP might look at him and say, look, if I need somebody to just take the top off the D, while we run play action and we set things up, he can do that. Is he going to set the world on fire? Probably not, but he could play a role. We need somebody in AVP's scheme that can just distract a safety, and eventually, if the safety gets caught napping, score a long touchdown, and he can
That's
do
Javon
that if he's
Baker.
healthy.
No, yeah, that's Javon Baker all day long.
Yeah, but Javon Baker, but Thornton's a lot faster than Javon Baker.
He
But
is.
for, yeah, but it was like since he's receiving the draft, Ross, I think his name was, great elite speed, but had nothing else.
But
That's
stuck around for a handful of years wherever he went because he had that elite trait.
yeah.
And so whether he's a good player or not, I don't think Thornton's a particularly good player, and I'm not fussed for keeping him. But I think that elite trait will have him hanging around on a roster somewhere just because he has that.
I think if you're going to keep him, you need to scheme specific plays for him. And there's been plenty of guys in the league that have had success. I mean, Deshaun Jackson was like one of the ultimate deep threats. Like they scheme specific plays for Deshaun Jackson to get open and take the top of the defense. But you've even seen with like guys in recent years, like do you remember John Brown from the Arizona Cardinals?
Yep.
Even Darius Slayton at the Giants. They just have these go ball plays that always seem to come off when they're on the field for these specific plays. We don't ever conjure anything up specifically to get Tyquan open deep down the field and just drop it in his hands. So if you're not going to do that, then he's kind of redundant in a way. So, I mean, if you're going to have more deep shots to him, then I'm all for it because we've got the QBs that have got the arm to reach him. But I don't know.
But I think you're right. I think it's about accepting what he is. And if we want somebody who's going to be like they're saying, Javon Baker has a much better chance of being a true proper X receiver. But if you can go, look, Tyquan is just fast as shit, and we can just have him run goes and posts and nothing else, and we can manufacture that for him, I think he's worthwhile having. I think that, if we're willing to do that, is more valuable to the team than Rager's kick returning or Butte potentially getting his head out of his arse and realizing how to be a professional. So I think for me is why we might see him make the roster.
I hope so. I do hope so for Butte's sake. That he does make the roster because I think he can be.
Well, he
can
can
be
that
that.
he's going to make it, doesn't he? Have you seen the comments he made?
Well, do it again against Philadelphia because usually after the second preseason game, that's kind of when you know you're on the roster or not. Because the final, it used to be when it was 4 preseason games. After the third preseason game, we know who's going to be on that 53-man roster because then the players that play in the 4th preseason game, they're the ones that are sitting on the edge of their seats thinking, are they going to get in? Are they not going to get in?
There are cuts after this Philly game, aren't there? The roster's cut from
90 to
70, 72, is it?
That sounds like
I thought it was 90 down to 80 to start with, and then 80 down to 53.
It might be. But I know there's after this Philly game, there is that first round of cuts coming. So.
Oh, no, not anymore. That changed last year. So
Did
in the
it?
2024
Okay.
season, there will only be one cut down day. NFL franchises reduced their roster from 90 to 53 on Tuesday, the 27th of August.
Oh, Jesus, that's going to be a long ass video to cover. But we'll have fun with it. We'll have fun with that one. Let's talk a little bit more about what we've seen so far with training camp for the Eagles. Obviously, we know the offensive line has been absolutely shambolic against this Eagles pass rush. 15 sacks in total, 11-11s it gave away, which is absolutely alarming to say the least. Javon Baker and Jalen Polk both had some good one-on-one days as well. Going into this Eagles game, obviously we need to see what do you want to see out of this game against Philadelphia on Friday morning. For me personally, what we saw from Carolina was basically who's going to be the third string, who's going to be the backup to Drake May, which is either going to be Joe Milton or Bailey Zappi. I think we kind of can suss it out. It's probably going to be Joe Milton that's going to be the third string. In this game, however, this is all about Brissett and this is all about Drake May. For me, that's my own personal take. But we do need to see more of Drake May, more than a series. We need to see him. Bare minimum, we need to see him in a quarter. Bare minimum, because we need to see what he can be capable of. What do you guys think? Kieron, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, it does sound as if we're going to see more of Drake May this week. Certainly from what Gerard Mayo is saying and what Drake has said himself in the press conferences. I'm not sure how much that will be. I hope it's at least a quarter. Might not be. But what I want to see is the continuation of these young players that are exciting you. You know, I want to see Drake May connecting with Jalen Polk, with Javon Baker. I want to see, what can we do with Jaheim Bell? Can the young players on defense continue to impress? The likes of Farms, the likes of Wilson, the likes of Alex Austin, Pettis, like these Joe Giles Harris, who had a really good game the other night. I want to see what these guys can do. We know what the starters are capable of, but I want to see the young guys, make a bit of a statement against Philly. It'll be a tough game. Even their backup players will be relatively decent. You got to think that probably Cooper DeJean and Quinion Mitchell are probably going to play a fair bit in this game, I would have thought, considering the cornerback depth that the Eagles have got. So I just want to see some excitement. I don't want to be bored to tears like I was the other night, waiting for us to kick a field goal. I want to see a bit of excitement, a bit of spice, cooking up a couple of exciting plays where we can think, do you know what? Things just looking a little bit like they're clicking. So, I'd love to see that.
Johnny?
I think for me, it's especially offensively, I'd like to see. I'm not necessarily bothered about the output and what we actually do because Philadelphia are going to be a good team. I would envision the starters would play more, and I'd like to see, because one of the things that bugged me in the two series we saw, Brissett and May, were the penalties. So having 6 penalties in during the game and a few quite early on, I'd like to see a bit more, just a cleaner operation. So I'd like it to look a bit more professional. I know Kieron was saying some exciting plays, something like that, but I don't even mind seeing a vanilla offense, but as long as it's penalty free, as long as we're not making mistakes, as long as there's not, there were a few operational things in that Carolina game that looked messy and weren't quite clicking right. And we saw that at the end of the Belichick era as well. So that's probably not a Mayo specific thing, but just to look a bit cleaner. And I would like to see the starters a little bit more. I think it's probably going to be hopefully some more Drake May, but I would envision if the offensive line is perhaps as woeful as it has been in by all reports in training camp against this Eagles pass rush, I think we maybe see less of him than we'd like, just because we don't want to see him have the snot kicked out of him pretty early on.
One thing I will say as well is that I think the defense will keep this close, because I watched Philly the other night and they didn't play a lot of starters, and Kenny Pickett looked horrific. I think he is horrific. I thought that coming out of college, didn't have a high grade on him, thought he was a 3rd rounder at best, and he just looked lost the other night. So I feel like we'll keep this game close defensively. It just matters if there's life in the offense. And as Johnny said, whether the line can protect any decent pass rushes that they may have on the field, because they do have a few of them.
Nick, what about you?
When a toddler steals something that he shouldn't have, whether it be food or a toy, and he runs around with his little legs trying to get away from whoever he's seeing. I don't want to see our QBs doing that. I don't want to see our QBs running around for their lives trying to survive because our O-line can't protect them. I'd rather see some sellotape around that colander and some of those holes covered up. I just want us to be better. I don't expect the world. I'm not expecting us to line up like we were 10 years ago and absolutely. I just want the players out there to make me have a bit of faith in them, because I haven't got it right now.
Yeah, no, look, there's anger in your voice, which you never really hear from you unless something's gone horribly, horribly wrong.
There's that video that you did in Germany last year at halftime, and You're talking about how bad the first half is. I'm depressed. Churning down a hot dog. You turn to me and goes, "What do you think?" I've got half hot dog in my mouth, and I'm like, "Well, it's fucking shit." And it's just like, oh, come on. I don't want to be in this position. I don't want to be sat here watching a game thinking, God, we're terrible. I just want the effort. I don't mind us not being great. I just want the effort. I want to be able to sit there and say, you know what, we lost. We weren't the better. They were the better team. But boy, did we turn up and make it hard for them. I don't want us to turn up, roll over, and have our bellies tickled.
I think that's perfectly put. I can't really argue with that. Listen, I just want to see more of what Drake May can offer. That's all I really want to see out of this one against the Eagles. If we see more of what if Drake May could actually show his talents that he had at NC, because remember when he was at North Carolina, he also didn't have an offensive line. He also barely had any receivers. His best receiver was I think was Tez Walker. That was his best receiver. He had barely an offensive line in NC. So really, if you think about it logically, Drake May's coming into the same sort of situation where he originally was when he was in college. Lack of an O-line, but this time he actually does have potentially, I'll say potentially because we still haven't seen him in May proper game time yet, but he has potentially very good receivers out there with the likes of Polk, with the likes of Javon Baker. We already know Demario Douglas is a clutch receiver. So I just want to see more of that. I do want to see more of that, and he was very good throwing on the run as well. So that's all I want to see out of Drake. And yeah, this offensive line, it needs tuning up big time. Otherwise, it could be a very, very long season ahead. And we are going against some teams that have got better pass rushes than us, and it will not be pleasant. It really won't be pleasant. But we'll have to see. We'll have to see. Okay, gentlemen. Any last words before we get on out of here?
Not from me.
No.
Just a quick one on. We spoke briefly in the green room, didn't we, about Christian Gonzalez? Obviously, a lot of pressure on him going into this season after he looked like a future all-pro down the stretch last year before injury. Obviously, he's going to be our cornerback one, immensely talented player that we all think he's going to go on to be a star. But there has been a suggestion that he's perhaps struggled a little bit in camp. I mean, yes, he's coming off quite a serious shoulder injury, but we spoke a little bit in the green room about his record in the one-on-ones is not great. I mean, yes, that doesn't always translate, and he could be absolutely fine when it comes to the games. But yeah, when you're seeing a couple of reports saying he's not quite been as effective this year around, is that a reason to be concerned, or is that an overreaction, do we think? Because, like we said, we're relying on this guy to be our number one corner, and we spoke on the podcast right back at the start of the offseason about the gauntlet of receivers he's facing. He's got Jamar Chase in 3 weeks' time. Is that a reason to be concerned?
I think it's just fitness at the end of the day. It is. He's come back with a really bad injury. And I'm hopeful that injury hasn't made him lose a step. That's the big thing. It's not can he get to match fitness? It's has he lost a step due to that injury? Because that could be the defining factor in covering the receiver for the interception or pass breakup and then missing your defender by half a yard and he takes it to the end zone.
I mean, I hope his shoulder injury hasn't caused him to lose a step, because that would be a huge concern.
Yeah,
if he's got to that point. But I don't know. I think for me, I'll wait till I see him in live reps and in real game time. I think he's coming off an injury. By all accounts, he held himself quite well against AJ Brown and Devontae Smith. AJ Brown didn't have much success against him. In one-on-ones, going 1-4 is not a huge deal. That he wasn't burnt on any reps by all accounts. It was all underneath stuff, which in one-on-ones, if you're going to run a slant, then yeah, you're probably going to complete it. So whatever. And it's not worth taking much from them, I don't think. I like I say, for me, I'm more concerned about Marcus Jones and Jonathan Jones being healthy. and what we're going to do opposite him. Because I think if they're not, and we've got Sean Wade or Alex Austin out there, I don't think people are going to be throwing at Christian Gonzalez. I think they're definitely going to be targeting that other corner. So I think, the chances are he's not number one on the list of concerns in the secondary.
No, that's true. I mean, Alex Austin did fairly well to the back end of last season, so maybe there's potential there, but we'll have to see.
I guess another thing would be as well is it's kind of like a 50-50. Should we be concerned that Gonzalez is losing these one-on-ones consistently in camp, or are our receivers actually pretty good? Because if Baker and Polk and Booty and those guys are separating from Gonzalez and beating him in the 1v1s, is that good for them or is that bad for him? But we're so used to having poor receivers that maybe this is just a sign of things to come where these guys are actually going to do something on the field for once.
Yeah, is that Coke you're drinking or copium? Because it's one of two. Anyway, right, we're going to go on now, lads. Thank you so much for it. A cracking show, if I don't say so. Thank you everyone that's been watching. Make sure you hit the like button on your way out. Subscribe to the channel. Tell all your friends. Share all the content. Follow us on all our social media platforms, and you can follow us on Spotify as well. We will be back next Tuesday for a review of the Eagles game, and then building up to a preview of the Washington football team. It's not the football team anymore. Washington. They keep changing their name. The Washington Commanders, beg your pardon. Where we'll face in preseason week 3. But for now, thank you to Nick, thank you to JD, thank you to Kieron, thank you to Kez, and last but not least, Vidarian Low, just sod off. Good night. Go Patriots.